Welcome everyone. My name is Jacqueline Carabinas. I work here with Demonstrated Success. And today we have Heather Jenkins, who's going to be presenting to you on understanding and using the state assessment for accountability measures title initiatives. And thanks for joining us today. We know that it's hard to make time out of the day, so we're glad to have you. So again, like I said, my name is Jacqueline and I'm here with Heather, and we work with Demonstrated Success. We do a wide range of things in New England, and we are excited to share our expertise with you today on using data to inform instruction. So you'll get an email after we're completed today, probably within 24 hours, I believe, and you'll get the certificate of completion and any handouts or links that we shared, including the slides. And please participate. You can share your thoughts in the Q&A. If you want to chat during the presentation, you can use the chat. Just make sure you choose everyone so it doesn't just go to Heather and myself. It will go to everyone that's here in the webinar today. And as you have questions, I can collect them and pass them on to Heather so she can answer them throughout the webinar. And as usual, we have a feedback survey at the end that we do read, and we really appreciate people taking the time to fill those out. So at the end, we'll share that survey, and we appreciate your feedback.
Great, thank you. So again, welcome everybody. I'm Heather Jenkins. I'll be your presenter today. I am sort of the everything New Hampshire SAS here at Demonstrated Success. So I really want to talk to you today about how that's related to a lot of your grant writing and title initiatives and things of that sort. The first thing I wanted to do here, this is the agenda. I want to just make sure we're all on the same page when it comes to New Hampshire SAS. I want to talk a little bit about the scoring and the data that you will see for New Hampshire SAS. I know that there was a webinar previously that Mike showed you all iPlatform, but I want to show you a little bit of that Cambium reporting portal for New Hampshire SAS. And then we're going to go through 3 different examples of how you might dive into New Hampshire SAS data, whether it be ELA, math, or science, and how you might be able to create your grant writing requests and walking through the process of creating them for each one of those subject areas. So first things first, again, like I said, Mike had given you some general information about iPlatform and iReport. Today, we're really going to focus here on the Cambium New Hampshire SAS portal. The data is a little bit more detailed. It's a little bit more than just an overall subject level. So we'll be able to kind of dive into a little bit more of how you might be more specific, I guess, with what your needs might be within your particular schools. So just a little bit about New Hampshire SAS, again, to make sure we're all on the same page. When we're talking about the grades that are tested each spring, for ELA, it's grades 3 through 8. For math, it's the same, grades 3 through 8. And for science, it's just grades 5, 8, and 11. So when we're talking about the grant writing that you might be doing specific to New Hampshire SAS, these are the grade levels that are included within those particular assessments. When it comes to the results of the assessments, they're in the spring. Obviously, students are taking them in the spring. Their math and science results are available once those tests are completed. If it's a really busy testing time, then it might take 24 or 48 hours because the system is just bogged down with so many assessments being taken, but it's pretty automatic. The ELA, you have to do the reading and writing portions before those are complete. This is one thing that people get a little bit confused on. If for some reason you go into the Cambium portal and you don't see any sort of results, you might be set up as a teacher in Tide, and so you'll need rosters to be able to see the information. So if you ever have any trouble viewing the information, it is probably something to talk to your administrator, your I4C coordinator about making sure your access is correct. If you are a school coordinator or a principal or admin, you don't need rosters set up. And if you are a TA or a proctor in Tide, you will not be able to see the information. So again, the information that we're talking about is that New Hampshire SAS testing portal. So anywhere folks are administering these assessments, it's the same portal, but you go into the reporting portion. So why would we use this particular data? First and foremost, you're able to look at curriculum effectiveness, right? This is how are your students transferring skills from what they're learning in the classroom to what is on the assessment that is completely standards aligned. A lot of times when we look at New Hampshire SAS data, we're looking not just at the student level, but we can look at the grade as a whole or your school as a whole. We can start looking at historical data to see overall trends or areas of weakness. Specifically looking at multiple years, it takes well, this was a high class that did this, or this was a low class. We've looked over the last 3 years, and regardless of who the students are, we're weak in these particular areas. And then the last thing is, because we're going to be looking on the Cambium portal, you will be able to see the information down to the grade level and then to a specific area, either of math or ELA or science. And you can make instructional changes in those particular areas that make a little bit larger impact. Next, I want to talk, because you saw the iReport and iPlatform information, you saw overall grade level. So I want to talk a little bit about how the New Hampshire SAS summative assessments are shown on the Cambium portal, and it's a lot more detailed. So I just want to make sure that everybody kind of understands the way that it's scored and the information that you might be getting. So this is the reporting and scoring structure for New Hampshire SAS. You have your specific subjects. You have your reporting categories that tend to be specific areas of ELA and science, or your domains of math. And then we have specific clusters and the standards underneath a cluster, which is kind of like a group of standards. Going into each one, first is subjects. So again, here's our subjects. It's probably old news at this point, but again, we have only specific grade levels that are tested. These subjects and the New Hampshire SAS reports are completely based on the Common Core standards for math, and then ELA, and then the next generation science standards. All of these standards are what the New Hampshire Department of Education is understanding that folks are going by. I know there's a couple districts that have your own standards. They are pretty much based, from what I have seen around the state, they're pretty much based on the Common Core standards, but there might be some additional ones put in there. So again, these tests are already aligned to that, so it's helpful. When it comes to subject scores, what you have seen before is on the iPlatform, and that's 4 levels of proficiency. So for ELA, math, and science, the levels are: level 1 is below proficient, level 2 is approaching, level 3 is proficient in applying, and level 4 is highly proficient in applying. So you're looking for, when you're talking your overall proficiency percentage, you want proficient in applying and highly proficient in applying. Both of those are considered proficient. To get subject scores, there are cut points to be able to put students in specific levels. So each student gets what's called an achievement score, and then those are all averaged for your school or a particular grade level or district to be able to get overall achievement scores for a specific grade level. So if we were on the portal, this is what it looks like. I have my fake students here. I'm a huge athlete fan. So these are my athletes in my class. But this is a scaled score that each student gets. And again, it is averaged, and that's how the overall performance levels are. And you've got your 4 levels of performance here. I'm kind of belaboring this just a little bit because it gets confusing. You've got 4 levels of proficiency for your subjects, but when it comes to reporting categories, it's a little bit different. So the reporting categories for math, they change from year to year. So depending on the grade level you're looking at, you have different domains of math. So the reporting categories shift a little bit depending on which grade level you're looking at. But ELA is the same. It's reading, informational reading, literature, and writing. And then science is always earth science, life science, and physical science. Now, when it comes to these particular reporting category scores, they are based on your standards. So these are the Common Core standards. And again, these are our domains of math. You might have more than one domain in a reporting category for math, but overall, those are those big sort of categories of math. Same thing for ELA, your big categories here. And for science, you've got your physical, life, and earth science. When it comes to the reporting, there are only 3 levels of reporting for the reporting categories. So when we start looking at data, if you're looking right on that portal, it gets confusing because you think I don't have anybody who's highly proficient, but that's because there's only 3 levels. If we're talking about reporting category, each reporting category has what their sort of definition of low, at or approaching, or on or above is. It depends on what we're talking about, if it's math or ELA or science, but these are just some examples here. And then here's what this might look like. This is a science example here. I've got my students, and then I have my overall, but then here are my reporting categories. So this is where I just am showing you here. There's 4 levels of proficiency here in the total score, but then there's only 3 levels for each one of the reporting categories. When it comes to clusters and standards, those are also available for the New Hampshire SAS summative assessment. These are basically what we're talking about, just to make sure you understand what I mean by a cluster and a standard. So we're looking at our math, we're looking at the reporting category of operations and algebraic thinking. And within this reporting category, we have what are called clusters of standards. So those are kind of like an overarching set, skills. And then underneath that, you have the specific standards listed underneath it. So the standards are listed underneath your clusters. A lot of times when we say what we want to concentrate on, we don't necessarily concentrate on one individual standard, but we look at a cluster of standards to see how students are doing in that particular area. Same thing for ELA. We're looking at reading standards for literature right now as our reporting category, our clusters or key ideas and details or craft and structure, and then you have your standards underneath that. For science, you have your clusters or what are called disciplinary core ideas. This here are our physical science clusters. There are not necessarily standards underneath that. It really just goes to the cluster level for science. So if we look here, this is an example of ELA. So we have our all our students over here, and then we have our cluster here of craft and structure, and another cluster of integration of knowledge and ideas. And then within this, we will have specific standards in each one of those. So here's your reporting category, your clusters, and then your standards underneath. If you are looking at data from the New Hampshire SAS reporting portal, you're going to see a lot of these symbols here that get a little bit tricky. But you're able to see your standards if you click right on the standard. And then I want to talk a little bit about what these particular symbols mean. So if I just sort of zero in on this particular area, I've got now each one of my standards has what it says is proficient and whether it's weak or strong. There's 2 indicators. Really what we're looking mostly at is this proficient area. Are we proficient or are we not? And these symbols correlate with specific levels of proficiency. So if you've got the check mark, it's the above proficiency standard. The little consumer reports half circle is at or near proficiency standard, and the X is below proficiency standard. If you're a smaller school, you might have some of these asterisks that say insufficient information, which just means not enough students got questions on that assessment to be able to deem whether your school overall is above, at, or near, or below. So this is really what we're looking at when it comes to proficiency. But if you have a lot of the same symbols, like you have a lot of areas which you're below or a lot of areas in which you're above the proficiency standard, there's a second indicator here, which is this weak or strong. And what these mean is the plus means it's an area of strength. So even if you had all of your standards were below, you might still have an area of strength because relative to your students and how they performed on this assessment, even though they were below proficiency standard and everything, something might be considered an area of strength relative to others, even though they're still not super great at it, if that makes sense. This performance is similar to the test as a whole, just means it's an average standard for your students, and then a negative is an area of weakness. So if you are not able to really determine on the proficiency level because you're either really high or really low, you might use the second indicator. Just again, for science clarification, I just want to make sure that there's your reporting category, your clusters, but there are no standards that are attached to those. So this is giving you whether they are proficient in this disciplinary core idea or whether it's a weak or strong standard. Okay. That's a lot of information on how to look at the data. You might be already well versed in how to look at the data. I just wanted to make sure, since we were using New Hampshire SAS data, that you knew sort of what we were looking at here. So I'm just going to pause for a second and just make sure that nobody has any questions on looking at the data or where to find it. And then I'll move on to my examples.
No questions so far, but if anyone has one, feel free to throw it in the Q&A.
Thanks, Jacqueline. Okay, so let's get into an example of how you might use this data to do a grant, some grant writing for ELA. So there was a previous webinar that we had that was the understanding this backwards planning and the grant writing. And I believe that Jacqueline and Karen were on this one. So I wanted to use the same format, but I want to use New Hampshire SAS data to be able to fill in each area of this particular template. So again, we're looking at priorities. So what you're based on a needs assessment or data, we are going to be talking a lot about the New Hampshire SAS data. So it will be all relative to that. We have a specific outcome that we want to make sure that we're showing. So it should be observable, it should be tangible. Your performance measurement, you learned a little bit about SMART goals in one of the previous webinars. So we're going to be talking about the creating a SMART goal that has to do with specifically with the New Hampshire SAS summative data. And then the activities that you will be doing and using to be able to support meeting the outcomes that you have. So first things first, if we're looking at the priority or what we're looking at as a needs assessment or data, this here is an example of what you might see for ELA data within the reporting portal. The big things to kind of look at here, these are screenshots. So I took just different portions of the system so that you could see what you might see there. So this is an overall total ELA score. So there's 4 levels of proficiency here. And in general, 42% of the students are proficient in reading on this particular grade level. This is a single year of data, so you might do this particular and look at this particular information for multiple years. Right here, I'm just showing you 1 year of data, but you would most likely either use 2 or 3 years of data for historical data, or you might use, if you use iReady or NEWA or some other assessment, you always want to use more than 1 point of data. But for right here, I just wanted to show you in relation to the ELA data that's on the portal. So overall, 42% proficient for this particular grade level. As I start looking at all the information here, I'm seeing reading informational text and reading literature here. So those are the particular areas that are focused on the New Hampshire SAS. As I look at these particular areas here, I have my craft and structure, integration of knowledge and ideas, and key ideas and details. The same thing down here is craft and structure, integration of knowledge and ideas, and key ideas and details. So we start to look whenever I'm looking at ELA data, you can look at it with the lens of, are we better at reading informational text, or are we better at reading literature? I like to look at it more though in which particular cluster of standards or which area are we looking at, regardless of the type of reading that students are doing or the type of literature that it is. So as I'm looking at this, I can see here that key ideas and details for both reading informational text and reading literature are below proficiency standard in 2 areas here. It's below here, and then it's approaching here. But we have either that it's an area of weakness or relative to the test as a whole is pretty average. Compared to craft and structure, where I've got all of these were at least approaching, right? Or in the reading literature, they are actually above proficiency standard. So craft and structure doesn't seem to be all that challenging for students compared to the key ideas and details. And then this integration of knowledge and ideas, I again have, this is an area of strength here for their students. And so I've got these, they're at least approaching. And then here with the integration of knowledge and ideas, I've got right here, I've got the check or at least approaching. So overall, I'm seeing a problem with key ideas and details. So I've looked at the New Hampshire SAS data to see this. Again, this is 1 year. I could look at more than 1 year and see if it's a trend that I'm seeing every time that I have these particular grade levels, or maybe it's a trend for specific grades 3 through 5 or whatever it is. So as I'm doing this, now I've looked at that data, and as I am writing my grant, I am going to be putting in the information that I am seeing within my data, right? So the needs assessment reveals that students in grades 3 through 5 are struggling with the transfer of reading skills in the area of key ideas and details, as shown on the New Hampshire SAS reading assessment. I did put the little asterisk in here, make sure you're looking at more than 1 year, or you're looking at other data points as well. But this is what we're seeing. So this is our needs assessment, and we are basing it off of that New Hampshire SAS data. So now the outcome. What is the outcome that we want to see? And what is that tangible thing that we are going to do to be able to create an environment where students are going to be able to show their understanding or have a little bit deeper understanding of key ideas and details? So what we have here is we have the grades 3 through 5 teachers will improve their reading instruction in the area of key ideas and details by implementing closed reading strategies as a way of having students analyze text. So we're specifically looking at closed reading. And the other portion of this is, so we've got what the teachers are going to be doing, but we want to make sure that we're including the students. So we say that students in grades 3 through 5 will show improvement in their ability to identify key ideas and details when working with grade level informational and literary text. So everything is right related to what we're seeing on those New Hampshire SAS summative assessments. When we're talking about the performance measure, I just wanted to show you this graphic. It's not the same graphic that you had before, but just making sure that you understand that we need to make sure that our goal or our measurement is very specific. We want to make sure that we can measure it, right? Students can meet it. We don't want to say that 100% of students are going to all of a sudden be, proficient in this skill. We want it to be attainable. It's relevant because we want to make sure that we are looking at our summative assessments and figuring out where students are, and it's timely. So we're going to have it be time bound. So when it comes to the SMART goal that is for the New Hampshire SAS summatives, there's a couple different ways that you can look at this. The first one I did was to really focus in on the key ideas and details portion of that New Hampshire SAS summative. So bear with me because it's wordy, because what happens with the New Hampshire SAS summative as we dive into the cluster level, like key ideas and details, is there's not a lot of percentages for that particular cluster of standards, and there's a lot of words, so bear with me here. So we want students in grades 3 through 5 will demonstrate an improved knowledge and understanding of key ideas and details as evidenced by improved grade level average scores in related standards from below proficiency standard in 2023 to at or near proficiency standard on the 2024 New Hampshire SAS reading assessment. Okay, so I'm going to go up really quickly to show you what I mean here. So right now, you've got these are below proficiency standard. One is approaching. We want all of these to at least be approaching on the next summative. So that's sort of how that wording in what it's looking at are these particular areas right here and these indicators of proficiency. As you can see, there's no specific numbers, so it becomes wordy when we say below proficiency standard to approaching or at or near. The other way that you can look at this is instead of focusing on specifically on key ideas and details, is even if you are going to focus on key ideas and details, maybe you want to see your overall proficiency level in ELA to be better overall, because we're focusing on that area. It should lift all the scores in general. So you could also do it from a whole grade standpoint and say students in grades 3 through 5 will demonstrate improved skills and knowledge in reading as evidenced by improvement from 42% proficiency in 2023 to 47% proficiency in 2024 on the overall New Hampshire SAS ELA assessment. So again, if I go back up here, I'm referencing this for this particular grade level and saying what the increase would be for percentage. Now it gets a little tricky if you are doing 3 different grade levels, you'd have to do some sort of average of those grade levels, or if you are a specific elementary school, you can see what your school as a whole has looked at on ELA. It's right on the dashboard for all of the grade levels, so you could do it that way as well. But so you can get specific into your clusters of standards, or you could go overall when it comes to your specific measurement for performance. When it comes to activities, these are just some examples of activities. We're going to basically citing evidence and what we are doing to meet those outcomes. So I put for each one of these, I put the activities. So the activities might be that classroom teachers are going to maybe get some money to attend a webinar series by Adlit, or they might be looking at getting some year-long embedded team level coaching from literacy associates to help them support the implementation of closed reading practices. So we're just making sure that we are justifying and saying, okay, this is how we are going to increase these scores. And so what are the things that we're going to do to increase them? The research that is sort of relative to this area we just put a couple of books here that have to do with close reading and just in general, what it means to do that in the classroom. So this is just evidence that supports why we would be doing the work that we have here. Any questions on that?
Nothing in the box for you, Heather.
Okay, all right. So the next thing that I want to do is we're going to go through the same procedure. I'm going to show you the data in a little bit different way, but we're going to start looking at math data and how you might do the same process for your New Hampshire SAS math data. So again, we're doing this sort of backward planning. We're going to be filling out each section in relation to how the New Hampshire SAS assessment is for math. So this is another way to be able to look at data within the Cambium portal. This lovely looking report, I would love to say, is something that you can just build in the system, but really it's a compilation of 3 years worth of data that's been formatted, but this is information that is available within the portal. All this data was found there. So the way that this works is I've got my overall and my total here, and then I've got each year going down vertically here. So if I look at this, I can see up at the top that I've got in 2021 in the spring, we had 45% of our students in this particular grade were proficient overall in math. 36 and then back up to 49. So we had a little dip there, but we're hovering right below 49% proficiency. What the data is showing us and what I have put on the screenshot here is that I've got, again, my years, and these are all of those symbols, but the words and then in color here. So this area here, the numbers and operations and base 10 and fractions are all below proficiency standard with the exception of this standard right here. But these are all of our standards on fractions, and the data is showing that it is really low. So to kind of dive into this area, if we're looking at the data and we see that fractions is low, we would start sort of creating our grant writing and in that area that is numbers and operations fractions. So again, our needs assessment, here was the data. We know that it reveals that students in grades 3 through 5 are struggling with the transfer of math skills in the area of numbers and operations fractions as shown on 3 years of New Hampshire SAS data. Now, this is one particular grade level, but you could look at all different grade levels. Typically, if you're seeing it in 5th grade, it was most likely a problem in 4th grade and 3rd grade. There tends to be trends that way. So again, this is 1 year, but you could look at all different years of data for that. So that's what we are seeing. Now, here's what we want to do about that, right? First things is grades 3 through 5, teachers will improve their math instruction in the area of numbers and operations fractions by planning and conducting team-driven action research to illuminate effective teaching strategies and tools. So we're looking at a lot of action research on this. And then students in grades 3 through 5 will demonstrate improved skills related to numbers and operations fractions as reflected in classroom and state assessment. So again, we're looking for a performance measure, we're looking at a SMART goal. The first one has to do specifically with that, the cluster level information and that at or near proficiency standard. So students in grades 3 through 5 will demonstrate improved knowledge and understanding of numbers and operations fractions as evidenced by improved grade level average scores in related standards from below proficiency standard in 2023 to at or near proficiency standard in 2024. So again, we're going here. These are all below, and we want more next year to say this at or near. And then the next one is, again, if we are going to really improve our instructions and number and operation fractions, if we focus on that, we should improve our overall math scores. So this is what we could write to improve an overall math score if you didn't want to do specifically down to that, the cluster level. So we've got students in grades 3 through 5 will demonstrate improved skills and knowledge in math as evidenced by improvement from 49% proficiency in 2023 to 55% proficiency in 2024 in the overall New Hampshire SAS math assessment. So again, we're just relating it to what we are hoping to see on that particular assessment. When it comes to activities, these are some examples of what you might do to be able to improve fractions within your elementary level students. So some of the activities might include that teachers will be provided with training on action research over the summer, right? We can't just assume that they know everything about what best practices are and what the research says. So we want to make sure that we're giving them some of that training. They might be paid for that training. The teachers might have a book discussion on building thinking classrooms in mathematics to better understand student-centered math instruction, specifically with fractions, and being able to talk about what their understanding is and to explain their thinking with one another. It's research-based, right? We know that we want to make sure that our classrooms give the ability for students to be able to collaborate. And so we might buy the book and give stipends to folks to be able to be part of a book group. And then the big thing too, a lot of times with anything that has to do with looking and trying to improve specific skills is making sure that we're looking at data. So maybe your school doesn't have embedded time for them to do that. So maybe you need to have teachers be paid a stipend for weekly additional time after school to plan, to collect data, to look at data, reflect on it, and see where they need to go with their instruction. So then the research is, we have the DEFORs, the PLCs. That's a lot of the work that they might be doing in the after school portion of their day. And then the Building Thinking Classrooms book, and then using data to inform instruction from NCTM is just another, again, resource that shows how important it is to use data and to be able to help it form what our students already know and what we might need to make sure that we're continuing to work on with them. Any questions on the math example? Can I get my 5-second pause? I'll move on to science and then we'll see if there's any questions at the end. Last one. So science here, again, we're doing this type of planning. Now, these are screenshots again from the New Hampshire SAS portal. So this is what the data might look like that you're looking at. So what we have overall here is this is the overall proficiency from year to year. So starting in 21, 22, 23. And then in looking at the data for this particular district, I saw that their life science seemed to be the one that students were struggling the most on. So I pulled their life science information out. And so what we're really seeing here is our proficiency percentages from year to year are declining, right? And then we are also looking at here when it comes to the proficiency, like the students that are meeting, it's going down. And here, even though it didn't go down, we've got more kids that are below than the at or approaching. So this is our data. So this is what we can decipher from that data. So the needs assessment reveals that students in grade 5 are declining in the transfer of science skills in the area of life science, as shown on the last 3 years of the New Hampshire SAS science assessment. When we look at an outcome and what we want to happen, so what we would like here, this data that we were looking at was 5th grade data. So elementary teachers will improve their science instruction in the area of life science with the implementation of a hands-on outdoor classroom on school grounds. So maybe you're doing some sort of nature's classroom or outdoor classroom. And then in that, elementary students will show improvement in their ability to show their understanding of grade level science skills through real life science experiments and activities related to learning in nature, right? If this isn't something that you would do, you could also be looking at some sort of supplemental information on science curriculum. Maybe you're looking at mystery science. Maybe you're looking at doing a little bit more inquiry based so that students are doing some hands-on activities that specifically have to do with life science. This is just one example here. Again, we want to create a SMART goal. So we say students in grade 5 this is the one that has to do with specifically life science. So we'll demonstrate improved knowledge and understanding of life science practices as evidenced by improved grade level average scores from 18% on or above in 2023 to 28% on or above on the 2024 New Hampshire SAS science assessment. So that's specifically life science. And again, for those of you who want to just do an overall, let's see how our science scores overall are benefiting from this particular grant. We would do the students in grade 5 will demonstrate improved skills and knowledge and overall science skills as evidenced by improvement from 60% proficiency in 2023 to 70% proficiency in 2024 in the overall New Hampshire SAS science assessment. Here's some activities that related to an outdoor classroom that might be helpful for you or would be showing how you would be creating those outcomes. So the district will provide funds for an outdoor classroom environment for use by teachers and students in all grade levels. Again, professional development time will be given to teachers to work with the project learning tree curriculum and to align it to the current science units. So really basically giving additional time for teachers to be able to understand and implement a little bit newer curriculum or maybe more hands-on curriculum than they've been doing in the past. And then the research is here. Any questions on that? Any questions in general just on the New Hampshire SAS reports or how you gather the information? I'll stay on for just a little bit in case you have any questions about where you might find that. Again, you can find the general information on the iPlatform site, and then it's also on the Cambium reporting portal, which is what we were really looking at mostly today.